Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the City Chatter Podcast. I'm your host, John Bernstrom, Public Information Officer for the City of Grand Forks. This is episode 51, and it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a pleasure, because after 42 years of working for the City of Grand Forks, we are joined by now retired city engineer, your former city engineer, Al Grasser. Al, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So, Al, 42 years. So when you started working, okay, we're gonna go back. What job did you apply for when you first in July of 1984? When you first started working for the City of Grand Forks?
It was a senior project engineer, which is your registered engineer position.
Was it tied to a specific project at the time, or was it a project in general?
It was. The city has lots of projects going on all the time, so it wasn't. One of my first projects, first tasks here was inspect it. They called it a popcorn seal out at the airport. The city used to do all the airport work.
Oh, really?
And
I didn't know that.
I came here and a popcorn seal. What is that?
That's a great first day.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a glorified chip seal,
Sure.
if you know what that is. So it wasn't that unusual. They just called it something different when you're dealing with the federal aviation.
Sure. So with that, when you came for the city, was that straight out of school? Were you working somewhere else? Question one, and question two: was this your first government job?
I started out. I spent a year working at Basin Electric in Bismarck.
Okay.
Electric Cooperative in the environmental. And then I moved to the consulting world in Alexandria, Minnesota.
Okay. And then landed
here.
Landed up here. All right. So when you first started with this, I asked this to lots of employees. I asked this to myself because I'm coming up on year 20, and I'm proud of myself for that. And then I'm talking to guys 42. When you started, were you just like, oh, this is the next stop along the journey of wherever? Or when you got here, you were like, start putting down roots. This is maybe the spot. Or did you not know at the time?
You know, I probably didn't exactly know at the time, but I wasn't, it was doing work that I enjoyed. It was a matter of, okay, let's try to do this. Let's see if we enjoy it. And, you know, we just grew into the community grew into us, and one thing led to another. Next thing you know, it's 42 years later.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens, right? It's I came to Grand Forks. I was going to be here for 4 years to go to college, and who knows what? And that was 27 years ago. You know, I say that all the time. So this is going to be a tough question, but some of the logical things I would think. Civil engineering for a government entity, for the City of Grand Forks, from when you started, like you said, you're doing a popcorn seal, to when you left last week, what are some of the major changes that you saw? You're like, oh, this is now standard of what we do, and we never did this back in 1984.
Well, there's so many changes that happened. I mean, you didn't have computers. You didn't have cell phones. It was all landline at best. Just the equipment, I'll give you an example. When we made plan sets, they did it off of, they called it, probably a different term, it was ammonia machine. It's this giant machine, and you ran these copies through, and part of the curing process was ammonia. You
really?
had a giant venting hood, and you'd go in there, and it would stink and smell like ammonia. It was just and I remember the old blue mimeograph. Copies. Yeah. That's what life was like back then. You did all your drawing by hand. Some people had printing that was so precise you'd swear it looked like a typewriter. Mine, on the other hand, you could hardly read. So
sure.
So yeah, I mean, everything is done by computer now. I could tell you lots of stories, but they'd be hard to relate to. But just the technology and the things that have changed, just amazing.
But even that drafting aspect, like you said, you had to draw it, right? And now it's you dump it in a computer program and go from here to here, and we need this. That's a learning curve that is always going on, right? Just because it's like you said, it's not like when you were in engineering classes in school, they gave you a computer class.
Yeah. Well, and the other big surprise, coming to Grand Forks, it was flat.
Sure.
Where I worked before, there was topography. You had room to run grades. You could do this and that and the other. Here, everything is flat.
Yeah.
And so Yeah, it's just a lot of changes at that. We'd do a project and you'd lose a foot of grade going around a radius and wouldn't think anything of it. If you did that in Grand Forks, people would think they're skidding off the edge of the world or whatever
Sure.
because you're just not used to seeing it.
I remember we were giving a tour to a group, I can't remember what it was for, and you were with, and it was we're looking at pump stations, and one of them raised their hands and says, "Why do you have so many pump stations?"
Yeah.
And you go, "Because we don't have gravity."
Yeah, yeah. You got to pump everything.
Yeah, everything, and I'm not even gonna dare to go on record of how many pump stations are in this town now. And we're always adding and maintaining and testing and coming online and going right and all that stuff. That's something. This is something I want to hear from you. So I think this is good. This is for general city engineering. Can you kind of talk through what a city engineer, and I'm not talking like the department director, but the staff within a project, like what are they doing within a project? They're not out there pouring concrete,
Right.
But let's take a project from, all right, this road's falling apart, a reconstruction job, if you will. This road's falling apart. From a city engineer, what are they seeing throughout that project?
Well, it starts way early in the concept stages. I mean, in Grand Forks, part of the challenge is, okay, we've got 30 miles of roads we should reconstruct, which is the one that we can maybe get done this summer based on budget and other things. So that's challenge kind of number one, is finding that the worst or the best application of the dollars. And from that, we do a lot of special assessing and things in Grand Forks. There's a whole process that goes through the financing where you have to follow state guidelines about creating a district and doing all the different steps in that. But on the engineering side, you take, let's say, call it a reconstruction of an existing street. You got to go out there and validate, the conditions and elevations of the driveways and the sidewalks. And
Even though we're
berms.
flat, there is different elevation.
Oh yeah, you'd be surprised. A couple inches here and there make a lot of difference. And one of the unusual things in Grand Forks, if you don't think about it, you drive down the street and you see a tree next to a street, right? You don't think much of it. If you actually really look at where the ground is next to that tree in relation to the curb, sometimes you got 6-8 inches there. And if you come and cut that curb off to build a new one, it looks like you're digging a major trench next to that tree.
Sure.
And everything, in the end, nothing really changes. But in the meantime, it looks pretty, and it can be impactful to trees and roots. So, but anyway, so we do that. We do the surveys, and then the staff puts together the actual plans and specifications. They draw up the project, determine how thick should the streets cross section be. What kind of soil conditions have we got? Do we have any unusual situations going on? That's preparing the plans and the specifications. So you have to do this in detail because you're going to be sending that out to a contractor to bid. You got to tell the contractor in very much detail what it is that they're going to do.
Sure.
And so that's really what the process of the bidding is. Once you go through the advertising process, you award to, most of the time, the low bidder. And then this is kind of unusual. Everybody thinks that the city still owns the street, and you kind of do. But during the contract, you're more or less turning that project over to the contractor. So you got to think ahead of time about what do you do for access? What do you do for keeping people, again, access
Yep.
and sequencing of the project. So there's a lot of thought that goes behind it to make sure that it works as smoothly as it can, because construction's obviously very disruptive.
And then is it from the general public, right? The road's open, job's done, in our head, because I can drive on it again. But when is a job actually done, right? Because then you kind of go into I use the term sometimes, the road is under warranty for a little bit, and with our climate up here, that's important. When is a job, quote unquote, done from an engineer standpoint?
Well, first thing, like you said, you've got the road open to the public, but really under contract, you're disrupting the berms, and you're having to reseed the berm and reestablish grass and do all that. That a lot of times takes quite a bit of time. That might even kick the project into the next year. Let's say you finish up the project in October. Well, grass isn't going to grow there anymore, right?
Yeah.
So the whole project kind of carries over to the next year until you can get the grass established. One of the unusual things I found in my career too, we had a project that we tried to reuse the existing soil, and it was really poor soil. And, you know, the feedback from the public was they felt like the entire project was a failure because the grass didn't grow right.
Right.
And as an engineer, that took a lot of us. It's like, well, that was a great project.
Right.
But it's that finished product that really the public saw and was really judging the project
Sure.
by. So anyway, that the project isn't done till the grass is growing and things are good. There's a 2-year warranty, like you said, on the project. See, we come back after 2 years if there's unusual cracking or things like that. We have the contractor come back and make repairs. And after that, you know, we own it lock, stock, and barrel.
Yeah, then we own it again. Yeah. You mentioned something, and I've heard you talk about this before. Soil. Talk about the dirt we have here in Grand Forks, and frankly, how difficult it is to build on.
Well, you've probably heard the comments about it's great for growing potatoes and beets, but it's really hard. We have a very expansive soil. That means that it's clay, and so when it gets dry, it does some shrinking. When it gets wet, it swells. The other unusual thing that we have in here is we've got these little seams, and you can't hardly find them, of silt. And you get these little seams of silt that run through the soil, and they end up acting like a conduit to bring groundwater. You know, especially if you're doing an underground project in a trench. You can be building a trench for 100 feet. It's dry. It's perfect. All of a sudden, you hit one of these wet seams, and water's running down the wall, and it turns into an absolute mess. So, yeah, the soil can be, you know, if we know that we have some of those seams or those perched water tables, and you learn some of this just by doing projects in the general vicinity, because sometimes, again, they're so thin you don't even notice. So you could do a soil boring and not hit them.
It doesn't pop up.
No.
Yeah, no, that's I've heard you guys talk about that before. Just soil here, the dirt here. I've used this term. Not all dirt is the same, and this dirt is tough to build a road on because that it causes the road to always move.
Yeah, and in the wintertime, we'll get frost heaving that'll sometimes be 1, 2, almost even 3 inches of frost heaving.
Sure.
So we have a whole series of things that we do on the engineering side to try to keep the manholes and things moving with the streets so that you don't create those basically what manhole becomes a pothole in the middle of winter when all the rest of the soil comes up. They say, why did your manhole settle? Well, the manhole didn't settle. The street rose.
Yes, that's a good point. When you see that, and it happens, right? The manhole isn't going deeper. The road is coming higher. And chances are, if you were to just leave it, that road would settle back down.
Most of the time, it'll come back.
Most of the time, it's quite amazing, right? You know, Mother Nature's undefeated.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to survive. All right. Well, we can't have you on the show without talking about the line in the sand in Grand Forks history, right? The flood of 1997. We're coming up on the 29-year anniversary. It's next week.
Yeah.
Well, you know, definition of the anniversary. The anniversary is what
29 years ago, we were in the middle of the flood fight.
We were in the middle of the flood fight, right? It was flooding 29 years ago. The dikes hadn't broken yet. So before 97, you as working in the engineering department, were you the city engineer then?
I was assistant.
You were assistant city engineer.
Yeah.
How did you fight floods as a city before 97?
Well, we did it with clay and we did it with sandbags. I mean, we knew basically where our vulnerabilities are. Some of the lowest spots, call it. Belmont Coulee was one. Thankfully, when I came to the city, they were building Belmont Road through there. And actually, the road itself then acted like a levee and helped keep that water from going back. Otherwise, the Terrace Drive area was always an early area to go underwater. The other area was Belmont, you know, by the golf course, the low area through there. So
it's the old brick quarry there.
Yeah. And so, if I remember right, I think at about 40 feet, you know, that road was going underwater. So some of the first things we did was we need to find a good borrow source for clay, and we need to line up some trucks and a contractor and bulldozers and backhoes, and that was our, you know, and sandbagging, and that was our flood fight.
And then, so you're talking about there at Belmont, but also understanding, you know, Lincoln Drive, that whole neighborhood, right, was a neighborhood that isn't there anymore, right? So how heavy was the city involved? Like, was the city involved, or was that a neighborhood action? Because that was all sandbags back there, right? Or were you hauling clay back there as well?
Lincoln actually had one of the only at that time had been a core certified levee. And so
Oh, they
there
did?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
there was a levee all the way along the backside of Lincoln, and there was a flood wall along Lincoln as it turned back towards Belmont Road. And so that was an area that we actually didn't have to do very much with during most of the floods. I mean, obviously 97,
Yeah,
obviously we did,
right.
but it might have even been 96.
Yeah, that was a wet year too.
Yeah, it was a pretty big flood in 96 that led to 97. But Lincoln actually didn't, even though it was low, it was protected by a levee. So it wasn't one of our first areas that we had to worry
So
about.
from your priority standpoint as the city, you're like, they're protected to a certain number. We need to go protect these other areas. How about Riverside neighborhood? How were they as far as where did they fall on the pecking order of protection from a city standpoint? I say that because that's another neighborhood where we lost quite a few homes.
You
in
know,
it.
there were a couple, they weren't uniform, so you didn't have, kind of a single
Oh,
number
yeah.
through. There were some areas that had, over the years when you fought floods and you left the levee there,
You left
they
the
sort of had some protection. They weren't core certified
Right.
or anything like that. And then you'd have some areas where, the clay came out and you'd have to put that back. Riverside is very tight between the homes and the river, so a lot of that in those earlier years ended up being sandbagging because it was so hard to get equipment back in there. Even in 97, a lot of that started out as sandbagging.
So then right, so that's before 97. You get into 97. So you're fighting the flood in 97 like you've always fought it. Again, 79 was a wet year. That was before you came on, but a history marker. And at what point I realize you're tied to Mother Nature, but you can't. I've learned this early on. You can't store sandbags and they can't freeze. So you don't want to make too many because you need a place to put them. I know Fargo's fought that battle in the past. When would you start? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like when would some of those operations start, even though you may have a month of winter left or something? Because you don't know when it's going to get to 70 degrees.
No, back in those days, we relied a lot more on volunteers and a lot more on site or at a central processing station. We didn't have some of the buildings that we even have now. We're not
Right.
using them, but I mean, in Fargo, they use the Fargo Dome.
Yeah,
And they do
right.
some of that. To
Those
keep the
buildings didn't
sandbags
exist.
warm. Yeah, and so you did have to try to time things so that you could warm enough so that the bags wouldn't freeze.
You make them to order.
Yeah,
Right.
and yet you couldn't go out and do it in January because
Right.
you
No,
didn't
you
have
can't.
a place to store them. And so that was always a kind of a critical dance and a heavy-duty coordination with volunteer organizations. If you remember, I mean, we had school kids and volunteers from the whole region coming in and helping. And so a lot of that ended up being, I'll call it on-site, but it wasn't necessarily on location by location. They generally had a central spot, but it was not pre-made.
Right. So not to get into a dark spot here, but then flood in 97. And right, I don't want to say when did you know there's going to be potential for a bad flood, because that was a terrible winter, like record-breaking winter. But in your mind, again, you had fought floods in the past. You've been with the city at that point now for 13 years. When was your mind going in that winter of 96, 97, where you're like, this is going to be something?
Well, we knew it was going to be a big flood early. I mean, even in January, the Weather Service, we went into the fall very, very wet. We had lots and lots of rain. We then had lots and lots of snow. The Weather Service kind of talked in terms of having a record-breaking flood. Well, our largest flood on record, I think, was about 50 feet in 1897.
It is 79, I think, was hit 50.
Yeah, and so those were some of our biggest historical flood. And then they threw that 49-foot number out there, and I'm not trying to disparage the National Weather Service, but I think you got to the point where the computer models and things that they were using didn't work. And
Right.
so they did the best. They said historical. They threw that number out. Everybody's kind of glommed onto that number in retrospect, incorrectly. But that's kind of what, we used I think the 49 or 50 feet. And a lot of what we did was then building freeboard.
Right, on top of
On top.
on top of levees and whatnot.
Yep. And behind homes, you know, it was, if you can get by with 2 or 3 feet of sandbags, well, you can do that. I mean, physically, you can kind of get the logistics to make that work. If you start getting into that 4, 5, 6 foot range, you can't build everything. You can, but it's not very safe and it's very, very hard to do.
Right.
You need to switch to clay.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that, there was a combination of areas we had to put clay, and there's areas we had to put sandbags.
So you get through that, and then you're right, transitions pretty heavy to like, all right, there's water everywhere. This is no longer fighting the flood. This is cleaning up after a flood. I mean, I don't even know what to ask you as far as where your head was at. Right, that's the you were about to do something that nobody within the city of Grand Forks has had to do before. And like you talked about, there's playbooks and there's history and all this stuff. You're making history at that point, right? You're writing the playbook, and you know that's. How do you wrap your hand around something like that? I know what I'm asking, and I'm having a hard time getting the words out on it. But it's just like you at that point know that whatever you're doing is the first time as a city we've had to do it, and frankly we kind of have to make it up at this point because we don't have any history to back up on it.
Yeah, it's hard to even, you know, that whole that era starts to get pretty foggy to me.
Yeah.
We had been fighting as a group, not me, but as a group and even as a community. You know, we started fighting overland flooding. You know, 32nd Avenue South went underwater probably like the last week of March or whatever, and
we had that last blizzard in there.
We had a blizzard in there in April that hit just about the time we should have been throwing sandbags.
Yep.
Brought everything to a halt. So the days turned from 8-hour 5 days a week to 8-hour 7 days a week to 12 hours 7 days a week to towards the end it just turned into one giant day.
Yeah.
And when your mind, it's hard to explain, but when you do that, your mind gets I don't remember all of the details.
Gets
It's
mushy.
what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It starts to get pretty foggy. You're facing a situation like you said you never seen before. The hard part is it seemed like nobody could get a grasp at what our target was going to be to fight the flood.
Yeah.
I recall at one time in the EOC, and some of this may be just a matter of timing. So again, I'm not trying to throw any organization under the bus or anything, but there was one time in there we got a crest prediction from the National Weather Service, and we were already past it.
Oh, their
And
prediction.
we were like, I don't know, 50, 51 in that range. And it was like, we have a really strange thing in Grand Forks where they have the looped rating curve, which means our peak flow went through on about April 17th or 18th, something like that. The crest didn't come for 3 or 4 days later.
I was going to say it came in the 20s.
It was crazy. And so it threw everybody off. Nobody had ever seen
The flow was
like
slowing
that.
down, but the water was still going up.
When the
Interesting.
levees broke, we weren't at our peak flow.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so nobody could really predict in those situations what was going to happen. When is this thing going to quit?
Yeah.
The peak's past us. Well, we didn't know that necessarily
Yeah,
at the
you
time.
did, right, but hindsight, you're like the flow's going down. The river should be going down.
the upstream gauges are starting to go down, and we're still going up.
Yep, that's amazing. All right, so those tough days that they get mushy, right? And I get that. Then it comes into all right, we're cleaning up, right? Again, those are still because you're just one foot in front of the other. Clean the street, clean the landfills open. We just we have to clean things up, and then start the rebuild. But then it comes the design. We need flood protection.
Yep.
Right. We lost, so we need something. You have all these federal agencies taking a peek at Grand Forks. What can we do to help? How did that? Our flood protection system is amazing. I explained it to people, and it is phenomenal. And how all the ins and outs of it work, and how work is going on, but you don't always see work going on. Who designed it? How did it come up? It came from Denmark, right? I mean, how did we land on what we had?
I have to credit, we make it sound like it's all about me. It's not about me. It's about the citizens.
Put it this way. You were in the room at the time.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily in that part. My boss, Ken Vian, was the city engineer at the time, and he took a lot of the lead in the front, I'll call the front end of the flood protection project. I know that we shaved a number of years off the project because it was already a study. I think East Grand Forks had a study going. So some
Oh.
of the machinery,
Had already.
the bureaucratic machinery was kind of already rolling. And, the mayor at the time, Ken and others, really pushed on the federal level. And I mean, just amazing things happened. They worked with all the our congressional folks at the time. And I wasn't deeply involved in I mean, I know there was issues with where should the alignment go.
Right.
There were issues with, like flood walls. Why is there a flood wall someplace? Well, it's because the soils aren't stable. And if you overload too much soil, it can slip into the river.
Right.
And so all of that was going on. And again, I wasn't deeply involved in the actual design parameters of the flood protection. At the time, I was more logistically into the recovery.
Yeah.
We had to clean things up. We had to restore. I mean, you had to get the garbage out of the sanitary sewer in order for the sewer lines to even work.
You had
and so you're
turn
doing all
water
that
on.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Water. Those were the priorities: or sewer, water, electricity.
Yeah, so now we've got our flood protection system, which has paid for itself, I will say, tenfold since we've had it up. Now at this point, I'm now working with you, so I can. But the flood of 09 was a top 10 flood. Flood of 11, I believe, was top 11 flood. Short of we had to change which bridge we took. The best example I had of this was 2009. If you remember, we were in the EOC and Fargo almost lost that flood.
Yep.
And we were in the EOC and they talked about turning the interstates around to evacuate Fargo.
Yep.
And we know all that water's coming to us and stress level is pretty high. And I remember you said the words, you're like, we haven't filled the sandbag yet. And we're like, well, I don't know where to put them, right? There was a, the flood wall's there. That's I think we're going to be okay. And we end up being just fine. And the thing that happened the best to me is my wife and I, we were just married and we went out to eat. We went to Applebee's, right? It's a date night at Applebee's. And it was prom. And there was 50 feet of water pumping through that river at that time. And none of the kids in that restaurant, they were more excited to go to prom. They had no idea that the force of nature that was just on the other side of the wall. And I'm like, it's working.
Yeah.
It's working. Prom is going on. Yep. This restaurant is full.
Yep.
And they don't know and they don't care.
Yep.
Yeah, I shouldn't say they don't care is the wrong term, right? But it's not top of mind.
Yep.
And I'm like, we did it. We did it. And now we have people coming from all over the country that want to see our concrete walls.
Yeah. We did there was some nice work on the walls. Those were aesthetically, and I know the Corps worked pretty heavily with the neighborhoods to try to get the color and the texture and the style and whatnot to work. So, because they were, it was stressful. You took out homes.
Yeah.
To put these things up, and the neighborhood wanted to remain viable as a neighborhood. So I think that was a standard that we set, I think, for the nation, I think, at the time.
Yeah. And my office, the public info office, started as part of home buyouts and communication. And my predecessor, Kevin Dean, said he would sit there and he'd get yelled at by a citizen because the city wouldn't buy them out. Because they had what was it? It was a 51% or 50% damage will buy you. City wouldn't, and then the next person would come in line and chew them out because the city was buying them out.
Yeah.
And you said you got it from both ends, right? And it was tough, but over time. And now I have my children, and they go, "Yeah, we flooded once, right?" And I'm like, "Well, we flooded a bunch of times, but yeah, we had a big one." They're like, "Yeah, my teachers talk about it." And it's amazing. We're a generation away.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We're a generation away. I can even imagine now you within the engineering staff, right? We get to spring. I still block off time in April in my calendar of not sure what's going to happen, right? And I'm sure you've run into this too. And you have staff come in who are just I've lived here my whole life, but I didn't live through that. And that was, again, we're that generation away. And sometimes you have to. Not that you have to remind, but you're just like, this is why we're doing it this way.
Yeah, we on the engineering side, it's much less impactful now than it used to be. It's really a public works.
It's a public works function. Yeah,
you're turning on pump stations, you're shutting gates, you're making sure the ice is out of the bottom, and it's more functioning like that. So it's really a public works led labor issue at this point in time. I mean, we still have to look at things and coordinate sometimes with the Corps because you never want to take it for granted.
No.
But I mean, yeah, going back to, some of those floods in the 80s and 90s, uh, as the assistant city engineer, logistically working with staff time, you basically cut out about 2 months and
Yeah.
said, we don't have time to do projects during this period of time. We're going to be we got to be planning on fighting a flood.
Right, because if it happens, we need to be ready.
Yep.
Yeah,
And most of the time in those years, unfortunately, it happened.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and people could, if people could see our flood meetings, and I'm calling them flood meetings. This year we plan to have a meeting. We're like, nah, I think we're good. It is staff sitting around a table with a checklist that I believe your combo of your engineering office and public works developed, and just going down the line is item 1 done, item 2 done, item 3. All right, this is about where the river's going to be at. We're going to stop at item 45. We're all good. We're all good, and it's done. I try to explain that's how we fight floods around it. We do it around a table, and yeah, I got somebody out there right now, and it's done.
Yeah. It's
It's
so
amazing.
different. It is pretty amazing.
It's amazing. All right, Al. 42 years. Oh, okay. 41 and change. It was July of 1984 when you were hired. All right. So in 42 years, the world's changed a little bit. I was here in 1984. I was 6, and so here's some other things that happened in July of 1984. We talked earlier. I don't think this country exists anymore, but the last European country to allow women to vote was Liechtenstein, which we were talking before. Don't think the country exists anymore. And they were the last European country to allow women to vote, and they allowed that in July of 1984.
Wow.
There you go. This is another interesting one. All U.S. cars, this was deemed that had to happen, and it happened in July of 84, that by 1989, all U.S. cars had to have a seatbelt or airbags, not both, or.
Yeah.
Or airbags. I found that wording funny. This is, we're in a college town. The national drinking age was determined to be 21 at a national level in July of 1984. That was in 84.
When I graduated high school in '79, it was 18 in Minnesota.
Well, I was going to say Minnesota was different than North Dakota. I grew up in Minnesota too. My older brother talks about that. He's like, he was 18, and then, and then he went in the Navy and went to a different state, and then he couldn't have a beer over there, and it was a whole deal. I'm a sports guy, you know that. Pete Rose passed Ty Cobb for the most hits in Major League history in July of 1984.
Wow.
And he went on to get about 1,000 more. And then the Summer Olympics started in LA in July of 1984 and come full circle. The next Summer Olympics will be in LA.
Wow.
So all those things happened in 1984, including Al Grasser walking into City Hall. And so I have a question for you. For those that are familiar, the addition of City Hall didn't come on until late 80s, early 90s. Where were your offices at City Hall?
Well,
when you started,
we were downstairs in what's old City Hall now, and it used to be the old part of the old jail.
Yeah,
my office was literally a jail cell.
Was a jail cell. Yeah, for those that don't know, the basement, so where the council chambers are, you go to the basement of that building. That was the police department, and that was the jail. Yep. So your offices were down there.
Yep. Yeah, the walls in my office were like 2 feet thick. They removed the bars, but it was still basically the old jail cell.
There's no opening a window.
There's no window.
All right, so you were down there, and now you've moved a couple of times, but now you're on I use the term new side of the building that is coming up to be almost 40 years old.
Wow.
The new side of the building. Well, Al, I hope you don't bother your wife too much. Right, you're technically you're going to do some contract work with the city. You're going to help with the Red River Valley water supply a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, just enough to keep you sane.
Just enough so that when I walk through the door, people go, "Hey, what are you doing here?"
That's true. Thought you retired. But Al, I hope you enjoy your retirement. Hope you take some time. Hope you I don't know what your thing is. Find a lake, find a whatever. Do that travel, and then next spring, if we get a bunch of snow, I don't want you to sweat.
Yeah. We got a good team. I won't have to.
We do have a good team. Hey, kudos to you. You've put together multiple good teams, but you currently have a really good team in there.
Good.
All right.
Proud of them.
Al Grasser, city engineer, former city engineer, 42 years, retired last week. Last week with the city of Grand Forks. All right. Thank you for watching this episode of the City Chatter Podcast. You want to catch this episode or any previous episode of the City Chatter Podcast, go to grandforksgov.com/podcast. We'll catch you next time.